All right, today we're tackling something really interesting, a bit of a paradox, actually. We're looking at Hinduism, one of the world's most ancient religions, and how it squares up with this very modern idea of universal human rights. How do these two things even connect? Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the big, obvious question here. When a lot of people hear Hinduism, one of the first things that might pop into their head is the caste system, right? A really rigid social structure. So how on earth does a tradition that's associated with that, even in part, line up with this core belief we have today that every single person has equal rights? It seems like a total contradiction.
Well, to even begin to understand the Hindu perspective on this, we kind of have to flip our usual way of thinking completely upside down. It's not about starting with, what are my rights or what am I owed? Instead, it starts with the question, what are my duties? What do I owe to the people and the world around me?
And this right here really shows you that huge difference in thinking. In a lot of Western thought, we think of rights as something you're just given. They're inherent, you're born with them, period. But in the Hindu view, it's totally different. Rights and duties, they're like two sides of the same coin. You don't just get your rights, you realize them, you earn them by fulfilling your responsibilities to everyone else.
And this whole system, this whole idea is built on one core concept, dharma. Now, dharma is a huge word, but you can think of it as the ethical glue holding the universe together. It's more than just a list of rules. It's this universal cosmic order that guides how we should act, what our duties are, and what keeps society from falling apart. So, what are these duties we're talking about? Well, the core principles of dharma are meant to be for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. And they're exactly the kind of things you'd expect to be the foundation of a good society, right? Things like nonviolence, that's ahimsa, being truthful, not stealing, and, this is a big one, actively working for the well-being of all creatures. Plus, keeping yourself free from anger and greed. Okay, so that's the system of duties. But what's it all based on? Well, underneath all of this is a really powerful, really profound idea about what we are, what it even means to be a living being.
And that brings us to the concept of Atman. So the philosophy says that every single living creature, and I mean everything, from the smallest bug to a person, has a soul, an Atman. But here's the kicker. All of those individual souls are actually just little pieces of one single supreme universal soul, which is called Brahman. Think about what that means. On the deepest, most spiritual level, we are all literally one and the same thing. And hey, this isn't some new agey modern take on things. This idea of fundamental equality goes way back. It's right there, stated plain as day, in one of the most important Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna himself says it, I look upon all creatures equally. No exceptions, no spiritual hierarchy, it's all equal in the eyes of the divine.
So you see how this works? That big spiritual idea that we're all one isn't just a philosophy. It's meant to translate into real-world action. And you can see it right here. Ancient texts actually lay out these 5 social freedoms, and look at them. Freedom from violence, from want, from exploitation. Doesn't that sound a lot like a blueprint for modern human rights? The goal was to build a society where people are actually safe and cared for.
Okay, but if the philosophy is so beautiful and so profound, what happened? Why doesn't the reality always match up? And that brings us to the really difficult part of the story, the huge, huge gap between the ideal and what actually happened in society over the centuries.
Just take a second and read this quote. It's from the Rig Veda, which is one of the oldest sacred texts on the entire planet. No one is superior or inferior. All are brothers. I mean, how much clearer can you get? It's this amazing ancient statement about total equality and working together for the good of everyone. This is the ideal. And then there's this, the reality. A complete, stark contrast. The caste system developed, and instead of bringing people together as brothers, it created this rigid hierarchy, these deep divisions, and in practice, it led to some terrible violations of human rights. So what went wrong? How did we get from that beautiful ideal to this harsh reality? Well, it's really important to understand the difference between two concepts, Varna and caste. The original idea, Varna, was supposed to be about organizing society based on what people were good at, their skills, their nature. It wasn't supposed to be something you were born into. But over hundreds of years, that flexible idea hardened into the rigid, hereditary caste system we know about. Suddenly, it wasn't about your merit anymore. It was all about the family you were born into. And let's be clear, this isn't just ancient history. The fight against caste discrimination is still a very real, very important human rights issue in our world today.
So you've got this constant tension, right, between the spiritual ideal of oneness and the social reality of division. It's been a struggle for a long, long time. But modern Hindu thought has a really powerful way of looking at this, a way to try and resolve that tension. And it involves shifting the focus away from just what's written in the books to something much more personal.
And that brings us to this idea of anubhava. Basically, it means direct personal experience. The idea here is that the ultimate authority, the highest proof of any spiritual truth, isn't just reading about it in a sacred text, it's experiencing it for yourself. You can think of the scriptures as lab reports from ancient spiritual scientists, the sages. They're describing their direct experience of the divine. And the goal for you isn't just to read their report, it's to go into the lab and run the experiment for yourself. A perfect example of this in action is the 19th century saint Sri Ramakrishna. This guy didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He wasn't content to just theorize about whether all religions lead to the same place, he decided to find out for himself. So he fully immersed himself in practicing Islam, then Christianity, and of course different Hindu paths. And what did he find? He said that through each and every one, he reached the exact same state of divine union. His conclusion was simple and profound: the paths are many, but the truth is one. There's a great old story that explains this perfectly. You've probably heard it. The parable of the blind men and the elephant. You know, one man touches the elephant's leg and is convinced it's a tree trunk. Another touches the tail and says it's a rope. A third feels the tusk and says it's a spear. They're all telling the truth based on their limited experience, but none of them can see the whole elephant. Well, this idea suggests that's kind of what religions are like. Each one is grasping a different part of one single ultimate truth.
Now, here's where things get really wild. This ancient, mystical idea of unity, of everything being interconnected, the very idea that supports spiritual equality, it found a supporter in the most unlikely of places: 20th century quantum physics.
Yeah, you're seeing that right. That quote is from Erwin Schrödinger. Yes, that Schrödinger, Nobel Prize winner, one of the absolute giants of quantum mechanics. He spent a lot of time reading ancient Hindu philosophical texts, the Upanishads. And he said he saw a direct connection between their concept of Brahman, the all-in-one, and his own scientific work which described the fundamental reality of the universe as a sea of interconnected, inseparable waves.
And it wasn't just him. Werner Heisenberg, another founding father of quantum theory, famous for the uncertainty principle, he said pretty much the same thing. He found that talking about Indian philosophy actually made it easier for him to wrap his head around the bizarre, counterintuitive world of quantum physics. Why? Because he realized an entire civilization had been thinking along similar lines for thousands of years.
But maybe the most chilling and powerful example comes from Robert Oppenheimer, the so-called father of the atomic bomb. Imagine the scene. He's just witnessed the first ever atomic detonation, this awesome, terrifying power that humanity has just unlocked. And in that moment, to try and make sense of what he had just seen, what words came to his mind? Not words from a physics textbook, not a quote from a Western philosopher. He recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita: "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
So this all brings us full circle, doesn't it? We started with this idea from Hinduism, that our rights come from our duties. We saw how it's based on this incredibly deep vision of spiritual equality and unity, a vision so powerful that even the pioneers of quantum physics saw echoes of it in their own work. But we also saw the cautionary tale, how easily those beautiful ideals can be twisted and corrupted by rigid social systems. So it leaves us with a question, a really big one. If both ancient wisdom and modern science point to a world that is fundamentally interconnected, fundamentally one, and if our rights really do grow from our responsibilities to each other, then what is our greatest duty, right here, right now?